And notice how the mind feels. There's no right way for the mind to feel, but the Buddha taught study, meditate, contemplate. He didn't teach meditate on its own. So one of the skillful things you can develop as a meditator is to take a few seconds even at the end of a meditation session to just simply notice. What is the quality of the mind? Sometimes the mind may feel more agitated, more busy, more distressed following the meditation. It's like sometimes when we actually focus on what's going on in here, we notice, whoa! It's a serious, crazy movie in there. Other times the mind may feel calmer or sleepier or pleasant or unpleasant. None of those are correct or incorrect. What is skillful and useful is to notice. So a brief review, 30 seconds, 90 seconds, just checking in, quality of the mind, quality of the meditation. The mind was wandering a great deal, it was hard to discipline it, or the mind was floaty and it felt pleasant but not very precise, or. We can talk more about that other times or on retreats, etc., but very good to at least drop the idea in, to just note what happened while the mind was meditating. You're already superstars because you didn't do what a lot of people do as soon as the bell rings, which is go from this to kind of like, right? I've done it too. No criticism, but it's like we're doing this and then now we can stop. The idea eventually, believe it or not, is to meditate 24 hours a day. Not like this, that would be uncomfortable and not very useful and you'd get fired. But when you're at a business meeting, when you're driving to work, when you're making a meal for your family, when you're picking up dog poo, when you're getting groceries, when you're driving, to be in a state of alert, curious, calm. Wouldn't that be fabulous? No matter what's happening, to be in a state of alert, loving, curious, calm. Just having things arise and pass away. Things happen and cease happening. Many of you may know, some of you it may be a surprise to hear that one of the profound, I don't really like the word consequences, but sequelae, I guess, to working with breath meditation, which, by the way, is only one of 42 classical meditations taught by the Buddha, but a useful one, is by simply paying attention to breathing in and breathing out, you can come to a great depth and breadth of insight into impermanence. Why? Because the breath arises and then it ends, right? And that's it. None of us will ever breathe the breath we just breathed while I was saying that ever again. So through simply observing, even if you don't know why, even if you've never heard anything to do with Dharma in any way, to just be instructed skillfully to sit and observe sensations of breathing in and breathing out, and when the mind wanders, to bring the mind back. In time, unless you're very, very dull, and even then in longer time, there will start to be a dawning of insight. Wow, nothing lasts forever. Wow, there's just this experience, and then it's gone forever. It's a profound insight because let's say we're grieving or in physical pain. Certainly we've probably all had those two experiences and we'll have them again. If we can stay with this single instant, it's a lot less scary than projecting into the future, I'll never get over this grief, right? I'll never get over this heartache. I can't stand this pain, it has to stop. We get a lot of extra consternation, dukkha, suffering, when we layer on the fear to the direct experience of that which is emotionally or physically painful. So believe it or not, watching the breath, experiencing the sensation, can help develop insight into everything changes. Everything ends. This is very good news when you're in the poop. When you're miserable, when you're suffering, when terrible things are happening in here or in our lives. Someone we love is killed suddenly in a car accident, terrible things. It can be slightly reassuring, slightly healing to recall this too will pass. All of us have had some variation of heartbreak or terrible loss so far in our lives. Simply the law of averages. And there were times where we were so grief-stricken, so frightened, so broken, that we felt we'd never feel better, right? And we did, thankfully, because everything changes. So simply watching the breath arise and fall, be there and cease to exist, can remind us, even if we're not conceptualizing it, that this too shall pass. Why is that helpful? Well, think of a moment, maybe today, maybe yesterday, where you were distressed in some small, medium, or large way. You might have been vaguely annoyed, you might have had a headache, you might have been tired and feeling kind of grungy, or you might have been quite upset or got some bad news or done or received something that was really hard. Just think of something, doesn't matter how small, in the last day or two. Did you continue to feel the exact same way indefinitely? Well, we know the answer is no. It might have got worse, it may have lessened, it may have ebbed and flowed, but none of us can remain in the same state for a very long time. It might feel like it. If you're really anxious, it might feel like you've been super anxious for 2 hours without any reprieve. But if you examined it, you'd find that isn't true. That there'd been, rising and falling. Even if your anxiety was pretty bad for 2 hours, it was like a 4 out of 10, and then an 8 out of 10, and then maybe a 7 out of 10, and then maybe the phone rang, and for 45 seconds you forgot about the anxiety. You didn't experience it as well, as deeply, as intimately. This is super important. This too shall pass is a very good thing. Unfortunately, not really, but we can say unfortunately, that also means the good things tend to pass, right? You're deeply in love, everything's technicolor, everything's easy and joyful, or you've brought a new pet into your house and your heart's so happy, or somebody brought you a chocolate cake, whatever it is, and there's some sort of pleasantness or euphoria, happiness, grace, joy. You're holding your grandchild for the first time. And the feelings are wonderful. Enjoy the hell out of them. But they too will pass, right? They'll shift, right? We don't suffer because things change. Now we're into the Four Noble Truths, the Four Truths of Existence. I defy you to prove them otherwise. Please try. I did. Turned out I couldn't disprove them. Dang it, I had to realize that maybe they were truths, not maybes. Everything changes. I could just leave now because that's really it, but everything changes. Okay? That's the truth of reality. The truth of change. The First Noble Truth talks about the truth of dukkha. Dukkha, if you're not familiar with the word, is usually translated into English as suffering. Probably a more accurate translation would be unsatisfactoriness. So everything from the most subtle, like 0.0001% discomfort. So everything's amazing. You're at the perfect beach, it's a perfect day, your mind is so happy, you've got the perfect, exactly chilled, just right lemonade next to you, and the perfect book that you love, and you just feel like $1,000,000, as we say. And you're just a tiny 0.00001 because you'd like one more ice cube in your lemonade, or the book is so good, but it's going to end in one more chapter, right? It's just subtle. It's like 0.001%. You're so happy, you're so content, but there's just a tiniest little unsatisfactory. That's also dukkha. And then, of course, there's the tragic, gut-wrenching, soul-crushing losses. And everything in between. And I think in English, when we hear the word suffering, we tend to think of the big stuff, right? Like suffering. That's the heartbreak, the death, the cancer diagnoses, the pet that gets killed on the road. It's the big stuff. But dukkha is all of it. From the teeny, everything is perfect. It's so perfect. It's so perfect. Well, one more ice cube would be great, but it's perfect. Right to the most graphic agonies we experience of body, mind, and life. The First Noble Truth points to the truth of dukkha, that in this human body, in this human life, there's going to be some unsatisfactory stuff. Anybody ever notice that? Or have you had every single second, every millisecond since you came out of the womb has been perfect? Of course not. The Second Noble Truth says there's a cause to the suffering, and it's not what you'd think. It's not cancer. It's not car accidents. It's not melting ice cubes. The cause of our dukkha, the cause of our suffering, is that we want it to be different. We cling, tanha, greed, clinging. We cling to wanting it to be different. We want one more ice cube. Or we desperately want our best friend not to be dying of cancer. It is not, weirdly as this may sound, if this is newer to you, it's not the cancer that's the problem that causes our suffering. That sounds weird, but it's accurate if you examine it, and I invite you to examine it with your own discriminating wisdom deeply and well. It's not the cancer that brings the dukkha. It's our clinging to wanting the cancer to not be here. It's our clinging to wanting things to be different that causes the suffering. This may be a bit of a leap, but if you could be at graceful, loving ease with the truth of the cancer, which in this example is true, there is cancer present in the person's body, it will likely shorten their life by a fair bit than might have been expected. If you can be in ease and grace with the truth of that unwanted event, you won't suffer. Your heart will be more full, be more open. You might be able to show up with more love and humor and courage to help your friend. When we're stuck in, no, how can this be happening? It's so wrong, it's so unfair. Why him? Why her? Can we do it different? Can we do this? Can't they find a new drug? Some of which will hopefully maybe happen, by the way. That's when we're suffering. The First Noble Truth simply points out that there is some dukkha, some unsatisfactoriness in a human life. There's lots of joy and gorgeousness and wonderment as well. It's not a negative teaching, it's a realistic teaching. The Second Noble Truth points out that it's actually our reaction to the dukkha that causes the dukkha. It's our reaction to the things we don't care for. I want another ice cube. It's not the ice cube that's making us suffer, it's our reaction. It's our clinging, it's our wanting things to be different. If you could take that in and live the rest of your life aware, there's unsatisfactoriness, there's dukkha. Oh, it's because I want something other than what's happening. I want another ice cube, I want the cancer to be gone. That's why I'm suffering. Third Noble Truth says, so stop doing that and you won't suffer anymore. Mic drop. That's it. Just stop. Stop clinging. Cease all clinging and awakening will arise. How's that going for you? Anybody successful? I'm not yet. You're able to go, oh, well, cancer. I won't cling. I'll just be in a state of loving kindness. Oh, well, I stubbed my toe. I won't cling. I'll just be in a state of loving kindness. Sometimes it works. We have profound moments, each and every one of you in this room watching and everybody not watching, have moments where something is happening, small, medium, or large, that is unpleasant or bad or heartbreaking or rough. And we're okay. There's moments of grace. There's moments of, I'm not suffering. I'm with this truth. It is not a truth I would have wanted, but I'm with it with grace, with ease, with equanimity. And in that moment, we don't suffer, do we? There's people in this room who have family members that are suffering from illnesses right now. A bunch of us, probably all of us statistically, but I know a good handful of us that are having people we love go through some really tough stuff that are going to likely end their lives earlier than we thought. But there are moments, maybe days, maybe hours, maybe a meal, where we're not fighting against that reality. We're okay. We're not suffering. There's other times where we are suffering, we are clinging. Of course, we wish it to be different. So the First Noble Truth says there's unsatisfactoriness, dukkha, in this human life. The second says, and it's because we cling. We want it to be different. We're not in alignment with the truth of change, except the changes we like. We're super good at those ones. Oh, I won $1 million. Oh, I fell in love. Oh, someone left me a chocolate cake. Oh, great things happened. Oh, it's a sunny day in a beautiful place. Enjoy the hell out of those things. But we tend to cling to those too. We want them to stay, right? The last bite of chocolate cake is often really sad. The rain comes in, the storm comes in, or whatever. The wind comes up like it did yesterday, at least in Maple Bay. And sometimes we're like, oh, it was such a nice day, and now it's not. We cling to wanting the good stuff to stick around, and we cling to wanting the bad stuff to go away. That's the Second Noble Truth. That's the cause of our suffering, is the clinging, not the events. The Third Noble Truth says, stop clinging, you won't suffer. But the Buddha was a compassionate being, and apparently, he realized most of us aren't able to simply stop clinging. If you could, you would become a fully awake being. If you could cease clinging right now, 3, 2, 1, do it! You'd be a fully awake being. And we'd switch seats, because I'm not there yet. But the Buddha was compassionate, so he said, okay. He probably didn't say it this way, but bear with me. Okay, that might be kind of hard. So here's a path. Here are 8 aspects of body, speech, and mind to help us all cultivate the ability to cling less, to let go with more grace, to accept the truth of change with more equanimity. That's the 4th truth. The 4th truth is, here's the prescription. Here's the medicine, right? The first truth is the sickness. The sickness is, there's dukkha. The second is the cause of the sickness, the virus of clinging. The third is the cure. Here's the medicine. Take it. Stop clinging. The 4th is the larger prescription to help you with all of that. And that's the Eightfold Path. 8 aspects. Path is a little misleading, right? Because it implies linearity. It implies 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We do them in order to completion, which is a little confusing and not certainly what the experience of this is for almost any of us. So I invite you to think of it as the eightfold pie. Think of a pie of 8 pieces. And there's 8 different aspects. I'll list them briefly here. We could talk about them more deeply another time, that we're invited to cultivate, to eventually, ideally, master. 8 aspects of being in this world that we can focus on, train in, learn about, encourage each other. The first one is wise or right view. You all have that whether you know it or not, or you wouldn't be here tonight. Part of you has wise view. Part of you realizes that getting a whole bunch of RSPs and paying off your mortgage and finding a nice partner and buying nice clothes and having a fridge full of food isn't the answer. Those can be wholesome things, but it's not the answer. So there's already some wise view. Bigger teaching for another day, but you've got a clue. The second is wise intention. That's really interesting. Why did you come here tonight? It's dark out now. It's getting a bit cold. It would have been kind of nicer to stay home and watch a movie. In some ways, easier. Would have been easier to stay home and watch a movie, but we each in our own way decided, I'm going to go to class. I'm going to go to class, be with some warm-hearted friends or strangers, and hopefully hear something that has some meaning and some usefulness. So there was good intention. Wise intention brought each of us here or to your computer to watch tonight. Not because of me, for goodness sakes. Your wise intention, whether I failed you or succeeded or am somewhere in between. Your intention said, there's something I would like to learn or keep learning or keep training with or think about. These are 2 of the pieces of the pie. And we can cultivate these with various practices, various studies, big and small, right? If your intention is to feel better, so you drink 5 bottles of beer and eat a whole bunch of junk food, your intention was to feel better, but it wasn't wise intention, probably, in that the activities you chose weren't very wholesome and weren't all that helpful, ultimately, maybe in the short term, not in the long term. If you would like to feel better, and so you get up and you go for a walk, you call someone you care about and ask how they're doing, that's probably wiser intention. Probably most of us would agree. And arguably, the wisest intention would be to look at the mind that is feeling unhappy and figure out what it's clinging to and see if you can release the clinging and allow your heart to settle. So wise view, wise intention. Then we have a cluster of activities. The three next pieces of the pie are wise livelihood, wise speech, and wise action. These are often translated as right as opposed to wise. Again, slightly a mistranslation of the word samaditi, wise view, etc. We're going to use wise. It's a better translation. That's not me speaking. It's people wiser than I. So what is wise speech? Well, don't lie. Don't abuse people with your speech. Don't use your speech to create division, divisiveness, Everybody who thinks this is a stupid jerk who should be shot. Divisive speech, right? Wise speech. The Buddha said, cultivate wise speech. When you say, and that's with your mouth or up here quietly, angry, judgmental things, do you feel better? Not really. You might feel better for a few moments of kind of self-righteous. They're all stupid and they are all doing it wrong. And we might feel a little bit of self-righteous. We feel kind of good. But it's yucky, right? It leaves a biochemistry, leaves a mental kind of aftertaste that's not good. None of us like to be angry particularly. We don't like to just be hostile in our speech in here or in here. So the more you cultivate wise speech, and it doesn't mean you have to be a milquetoast. It doesn't mean you have to be, oh, I am. Do I come across that way? Probably not. You can be animated. You can be whatever you want to describe the way I speak as. I'm speaking somewhat wisely tonight. I often don't in my real life because I'm just like everybody else, not yet enlightened being. But it doesn't mean you have to choose every word so carefully and coat it with icing sugar. But it means you bring wisdom to your speech and you start noticing more often when you're verbally abusive or dishonest, like exaggerating, right? Oh, I had the greatest weekend. You can say, well, there's nothing wrong with saying that, and I'm not going to say there is anything wrong with saying that. But part of the study is to say, was it really the greatest weekend? Was that an accurate speech? Would it have been more wholesome to say, I had such an interesting weekend. I enjoyed myself so thoroughly. I went on a hike, and then I made a new recipe. It's a big study, wise speech. Holy, is it ever? So the Buddha said, pay attention to your speech. And I want to emphasize, that's not just what you say. How much of your speech is in here? Even when you're asleep, you can have dreams with all these words in them. Certainly in the day, most of us think fairly incessantly, and it's often not very wholesome, is it? I hate my job, this is so stupid, I can't wait, when's 5 o'clock going to come? Blah, 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 blah. Not all that helpful. And some of it's good, and a lot of it's just kind of neutral garbage, like daydreaming about, maybe one day I'll win a lottery and I'll buy a Ferrari. And okay, is that making you a better person? Probably not. It's not necessarily bad. It's certainly not evil. But what are you doing with your mental speech, your verbal speech? This is another piece of the pie. What's this pie? The 8 qualities, studies the Buddha suggested we take on if we want to stop suffering. Hang on, say what now? If you'd like to stop suffering, you might want to train in these 8 things. Right speech, right livelihood. How do you make your living? Whether you actually make a living with a job, whether you consider your living volunteer work, you're retired, or parenting, or taking care of your household, or. But the majority of our paid or unpaid time are 8 hours a day. What are you doing there? Is it wholesome? For the most part. If you, I don't know, kill kittens and sell guns for a living, not wholesome. Maybe you have a neutral job. Can you make it more wholesome? Maybe you're a grocery store checkout teller and you consider that a neutral job. How do you make it wholesome? Bringing attention to your work, bringing a warmth to your customers, bringing a cheerfulness to your day, doing it well and meticulously. What about our livelihood? How are we treating our livelihood? What are we doing with our mind? I've told this story before, but I saw this, of all things, on an Oprah episode. I didn't watch Oprah very much, but I happened to flick it on one day. And she was talking about happiness research, actually, and had some happiness researchers on there, some scientists I find interesting. I was glad to hear what they had to say. And then she showed a profile of a woman that her producers had found. And this woman had a job which, personally, if I had that job, I feel I would probably hate that job and be pretty miserable. Her job was on the New Jersey Turnpike, I guess, where you have to cross through and pay your $1 toll over the bridge to get into New York, to get into Manhattan. So she stood in this teeny tiny, I don't know if you guys have probably been in the States at times, driven on a freeway. I used to live in San Francisco, so I went across the Golden Gate Bridge every day. You give your $1 or $2. So you're in this little booth. It's probably automated now, but it didn't used to be. Human being in a little booth all day long for 8 hours, standing or sitting. Car comes, gives you its $2, you give it its token. Car comes, you give it its $2, like all day long. So this woman, they showed her, they had hidden camera footage on her because some people, I guess, had written into Oprah and said, there's this woman that is on the New Jersey Turnpike or whatever, the New Jersey Bridge of some kind. And she's pretty amazing, and she's this bright light. And so they filmed this woman, and she's in her booth, and I don't know, Neil drives up, and she's like, "Good morning, how you doing? You have a great day." And then the next guy, "Hi, how you doing? Have a great day, just make it a great day. Hello, hello. Oh, that's such a pretty mask you've got on." And she's dancing, and she's loving, and she's giving in a job that did not look like right livelihood for most of us. It'd be like whiny, oh, poor me livelihood, let's be honest. And it was such a beautiful example of taking whatever it is you do and making it positive, making it wise, making it filled with happiness, joy, and each person she said hello to that morning, if they were able to receive it, lit up. And what I especially loved is they talked to some of the commuters that obviously, went in every day at pretty much the same time into the city, and they said they deliberately choose her lane, and there's a longer line, right? Just to give you a couple of bucks to get your little jolt of happy. So the Buddha, I challenge all of us in this room, think about your current livelihood and how could you maybe bring a little more positivity, a little more happiness, a little more wholesomeness to it. Wisdom. Wise speech, wise livelihood, wise action. Actions are huge. All day long we take actions. Lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of them. Can you make them wiser, kinder, more compassionate? So we're now up to, if anybody's keeping track, we're up to 5. View, intention, speech, livelihood, and action. These are very easy to Google. If they're new to you, just Google Eightfold Path. You'll get some wonderful teachings on them. And the latter 3 of these 8 pieces of pie are to do with training the mind. Right concentration, right mindfulness, and right effort. Or wise mindfulness, wise concentration, and wise effort. So anybody notice in our brief meditation, it takes some effort to ask that mind to do one breath. It's like, I'd rather not. I'd rather make my grocery list. Or think about what I'm going to do when I get home. Or think about what kind of jeans I'm going to buy. Or whatever. It takes some effort to say, no, mind, come on. We'd like to cultivate more calm, more love, more joy, and less dukkha. And that takes training just like every other dang thing any of us ever do. Any of you train at your career? Any of you train at your hobbies? Any of you train? I know Neil's a new gardener in his new home, and you're having to learn and study and make effort and probably have some failures and whatnot. Of course we do. We train in almost every other thing in our life. Sometimes accidentally we train to be a parent, right? We train to learn that if you leave the garbage out for too long, the raccoons get into it and spread it all over the road, and we learn and we do it differently. But we kind of think our mind's supposed to take care of itself. What a dumb idea that is. So the mind needs training. So wise effort points to that fact that it's going to take some effort, some diligence. There's different translations to that word as well. Effort, energy, diligence are some of the translations of actually training the mind. In what? In wise concentration and wise mindfulness. Concentration, I talked about that a few classes ago. I talked about samadhi and insight practice and concentration and single-pointed concentration. I'll happily talk about it again another time. But that's one quality of training the mind. When we work with anapanasati, mindfulness of breath, part of what we're working on is concentration. The ability to, I keep doing this, to bring the attention to a single point and rest it in one place and have it stay there. Pretty hard, right? Yeah, well, you need the effort. You need the wise effort over months, over years, maybe over lifetimes to develop strong concentration. And then wise mindfulness, a much misunderstood word these days. But sati, mindfulness, is better translated as recollectedness, which is an actual awareness of what's actually happening while it's happening. It doesn't mean mindfully pick up your glass. It's a misunderstanding. That's called slow, not necessarily mindful. We can do it slowly and mindfully. That's where we are deeply, as best we're able in that moment, aware of this direct experience. So some of the things I noticed when I was attempting to be somewhat mindful was the coolness of the glass on the fingertips, the nuances of some of the muscles in the arm to raise the glass. It's not particularly heavy, but there's some weightedness to it. I noticed the chipped nail polish on the thumb as I moved, and so on. The mindfulness isn't doing it slowly. You want to develop the ability to be mindful in all circumstances. When you're driving in 8 lanes of traffic at rush hour, you're busy, you're doing, but mindfully is fully experiencing the direct experience of what's actually happening. Direct experience, without story, without fabrication, without layers. We can talk about that another time if that idea is a bit new to some of you. That's the 8th, not necessarily in order. That's the whole teaching the Buddha laid out in his first discourse after he became a fully awake Buddha. He taught the Four Noble Truths. His compatriots begged him to do so. They saw he'd awakened. They said, dear friend, what's up with you? I see you builder, you shall build no more. He said he'd figured it out. And they said, please teach us. So he taught his 4 companions of many years who'd been diligently studying along with, before that he wasn't the Buddha, now the Buddha because he was fully awake. And one of them instantly woke up when they heard the Four Noble Truths, what you just heard. The other 3 fairly quickly followed. And they said, you must teach this to everybody. And the Buddha said, I don't really think I can. I don't really know that people will understand it. And they said, please, you must. And allegedly the Buddha said, obviously in Pali, not in English, but, well, perhaps there are some with only a little dust in their eyes. That's you. That's me. Perhaps there are some with only a little dust in their eyes that will be able to hear these teachings and hear something in them that will, if not awaken us into Buddhahood right away, but create curiosity and resonate in a way that makes sense. Does it not make sense? That we suffer because things change and we cling to wanting it to be what we want and not the stuff we don't want. And if we'd stop doing that, we'd be okay, but that's hard, so here's 8 things to practice. Yeah, that makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. I challenge you with effort and diligence to study this. Go download the first discourse. Read it. Go download some great scholars and great meditation teachers talking about the Four Noble Truths. Go listen to Dharma Talks by anybody you like who knows what they're talking about and doesn't charge you money, because then there probably might be a real Dharma teacher. And see how they interpret the Four Noble Truths, and listen and use your discriminating wisdom and use your intelligence and use your brain to look at your own life. Okay, I'm kind of miserable right now. Okay, what am I clinging to? I want more money, or I want Janice to be kinder to me, or I want my foot to stop hurting. Okay, I'm clinging to wanting things to be different. What would happen if I could let go? What if I could just accept that my foot is painful right now? Or Janice said words that I found unkind to me today, or I have the abundance or lack of abundance of money that I currently have, and that's okay. Whew, no more suffering. But if that's hard, then you could look at your speech, the internal speech. I need more money, Or you could look at your actions. Well, maybe you should go volunteer to mow someone's lawn and get $20. Would that help? That would be an action. And so on. Take it as a study. One of the things that drew me to Buddha Dharma and stopped me from running away was that no one ever asked me to take anything on faith. They said, here are some things to look at. Look in your own life. Be your own scientist. I'm a scientist. I like science. I like data. I like proof. Well, anybody who's a scientist knows nothing's ever truly proven, but statistically likelihood, etc. And I was never told, just believe this, Cheryl. I was told, look at your own life. Notice a time you're suffering or unsatisfactory or a bit disgruntled or tragically in a lot of pain, etc. And then examine, what are the causes? What are you clinging to? Do you feel at least incrementally more peaceful when you try to let go a little bit? Is there a reprieve when you say, I am so sad my friend has cancer, but I'm going to thoroughly enjoy this meal with them? Is there an easing because you stop clinging for maybe an hour or a minute? The direct experience of your own intelligence, your own observation of your mind and your heart and your experience is what we're after. Don't take my word for it. Take your own experience. Take wise guidance from people who maybe have a bit more experience than we do. If I have a bit more experience than you, then take some guidance from me if that feels helpful. But you're not asked to believe. Go see if you can disprove these truths and then come back. Say, I have noticed that when I am upset, it is not because I'm clinging to something. Okay, then what is it? Can you explain it? Can you explain it another way? Use your brain. It's a good one. So, oh my, that's probably plenty for tonight. We'll close with just about 3-4 minutes of meditation. Let that little bit of teaching settle. And then I'll ring the bell and I'll dedicate the merit. If that's a new term to you, that is where we again remind ourselves and each other that it's not just for us. And so we gather kind of the good intentions of us being here and making the effort to come and to hear something that I hope has been helpful in some way. And we share it with each other and we share it with all beings. So it's never just about me. So just settling just for a few moments, just feeling your body in your chair or on your cushion. Just letting the body settle. Allowing those words to fall away and just being, breathing, with nowhere to go. With nothing to do. Just be. We close with a dedication of the merit, and I'll use a very traditional form that we are told was used in the day of the historical Buddha and is still said many times a day in a lot of Theravadan communities and countries around the world. Idang te punyakamana sawakya wang hotu. Idang te punyakamana sawakya wang hotu. Idang te punyakamana sawakya wang hotu, which essentially translate as, by the merit of this strengthening activity, may there be a cessation of the floods, the defilements, the greed, hatred, and delusion. By the merit of this strengthening activity of meditation and listening to the Dharma, may there be a cessation of the defilements for us and all beings. May all beings be well, may all beings be happy, and may all beings be free from suffering.